At exactly 5:12, 8 Iranian coastal defense batteries along the Strait of Hormuz's northern shore fired simultaneously. 8 Nor anti-ship cruise missiles dropped from their launch rails, ignited their turbojet engines, and descended to sea-skimming altitude over the Persian Gulf. 5 to 7 meters above the water, 540 knots. Their targets were 19 nautical miles southwest, where the USS Harry S. Truman was holding a northbound transit track with a crew of 5,200 sailors and an air wing worth more than most countries' entire defense budgets. To the Revolutionary Guard commanders watching radar returns in hardened command bunkers beneath the Iranian coastline, the salvo looked like the most consequential decision their generation had made. 8 missiles converging from slightly different bearings. Overlapping arrival windows designed to saturate American point defense systems, a coordinated attack that had been war-gamed for a decade. The analysts at Naval Support Activity Bahrain had been watching the preparations for 51 hours. The Nor missile's origins explain everything about its capabilities and its limitations. Iran purchased 60 Chinese C-802 anti-ship missiles in the 1990s before American diplomatic pressure terminated the contract. Tehran had already studied the design long enough to understand its engineering. What followed was 3 decades of domestic production. First copying the C-802, then extending its range, then modifying its seeker, then integrating it into mobile coastal batteries that could be dispersed and redeployed to complicate targeting. The result is a weapon Iran calls the Nor, which translates to light, and which represents the most capable anti-ship cruise missile in the Iranian inventory. It is a subsonic sea skimmer, Mach 0.9 at 5 to 7 meters above the water, hugging the surface to stay below shipborne radar horizon for as long as possible. Its extended range variant reaches approximately 170 kilometers. The warhead is a 165-kilogram semi-armor-piercing design, built to penetrate a destroyer hull before detonating inside. The terminal guidance uses active radar homing, a monopole seeker that activates in the final phase of flight and homes on the strongest radar return in its acquisition window. The seeker is the weapon's essential limitation. Monopulse radar technology from the late 1990s can distinguish a large metallic surface ship from open water with adequate reliability. What it cannot do is operate effectively inside the electromagnetic environment that a carrier strike group deliberately creates around itself. An active electronic warfare suite doesn't just jam the seeker, it creates false targets, corrupts its amplitude comparison algorithms, produces returns that the missile's processing logic cannot correctly resolve. The seeker was not designed to defeat systems that didn't exist when its software was written. Iranian Revolutionary Guard planners understood this limitation and designed their attack architecture to compensate for it. 8 missiles simultaneously gives the point defense system 8 simultaneous engagement problems. The doctrine counts on the volume overloading whatever human decision-making remains in the response chain. What it doesn't account for adequately is a system where human decision-making has been largely removed from the intercept sequence. The USS Gettysburg, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser positioned 22 nautical miles southwest of the carrier, had been tracking the coastal battery activity for 2 days. When the thermal signatures of 8 simultaneous rocket motor ignitions appeared on the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network at 0512, the Aegis combat system aboard the Gettysburg had classified all 8 contacts as Nor variant cruise missiles within 4 seconds of first detection. Engagement solutions were computed and weapons assigned before the missiles had traveled their first 2 kilometers. The SPY-1B phased array radar doesn't rotate. Its 4 fixed faces illuminate every quadrant simultaneously, updating track files multiple times per second, feeding data to a fire control processor that runs engagement geometry calculations in parallel for every threat in the picture. The Aegis Baseline 9 software that the Gettysburg runs makes engagement assignments autonomously within parameters the Tactical Action Officer has pre-authorized. The operator reviews and confirms. She doesn't build the solution from scratch. By the time she had pressed the authorization key, the system had already selected weapons, allocated them to targets, calculated optimal intercept points in 3-dimensional space, and begun the pre-launch sequence for the designated cells. 12 SM-2 Block 3A missiles left the Gettysburg's Mark 41 VLS cells in a staggered sequence beginning at 0513 and 22 seconds. The SM-2 Block 3A uses a dual-mode fuse, both proximity and contact, and carries a 62-kilogram blast fragmentation warhead packed with preformed tungsten penetrators. its mid-course guidance uses inertial navigation with continuous uplink corrections from the ship's radar, transitioning to semi-active homing when the ship's illuminator paints the target in the terminal phase. Its maximum speed exceeds Mach 3.5. Against a target moving at Mach 0.9 in a predictable sea-skimming profile, the intercept geometry is the kind of problem the system was designed to solve. The first NOR was intercepted at 41 nautical miles from the carrier. The SM-2's proximity fuse detonated within 18 feet of the missile. Tungsten fragments moving at 6,000 feet per second crossed the distance to the target in microseconds and shredded the turbojet intake and control surface actuators simultaneously. The NOR lost lift and guidance in the same instant and augured into the Persian Gulf in a brief orange flash. Total flight time from Iranian launch rail to destruction, 44 seconds. The second intercept followed 9 seconds later. The third and fourth were simultaneous, both arriving at their assigned targets within a half-second window at 38 nautical miles. The fifth and sixth were sequential, separated by 7 seconds. The seventh presented a slightly more complex geometry because the missile had executed a minor course correction after launch that moved it off the original track projection, requiring the Gettysburg's illuminator to reacquire and the SM-2 guidance to update its terminal solution. The correction was completed in 1.2 seconds. The missile was destroyed at 36 nautical miles. The eighth NOR came closest. Its seeker had acquired what appeared to be a valid target return, the USS Nitsa, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer that had been maneuvering to unmask its own defensive systems, and had committed to a terminal run at Mach 0.9 from 31 nautical miles. The Gettysburg's second SM-2, assigned to that track, reached its intercept point 4 seconds before the NOR would have entered the Nitsa's inner defensive envelope. Detonation. Debris scattered across 400 meters of Gulf water. 8 missiles, 8 intercepts, 0 leakers. The Harry S. Truman had not altered its heading by a single degree. It had not changed speed. The carrier's own defensive systems, the RIM-116 rolling airframe missiles, the Phalanx close-in weapon systems, had never activated. The engagement had been completed entirely by the escort screen, at ranges far enough from the carrier that the crew's first indication was the general quarters alarm sounding after the last intercept was confirmed. The time from first detection to last intercept, 4 minutes and 7 seconds. What Iran had started with 8 missiles, the strike group answered with 4 aircraft and a Tomahawk salvo. The authorization for retaliatory strike reached the Truman's commanding officer at 0519. The pre-planned response package had been built and updated over the preceding 51 hours, as American intelligence tracked the battery preparation activity. 4 FA-18E Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadron 81 launched from the Truman's flight deck via emails catapults beginning at 0522. Combat loadout: 2 AGM-88E Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missiles each, plus 2 AIM-12 OD AMRAAMs and 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders for self-defense. The strike package climbed to 22,000 feet and accelerated toward the Iranian coastline at Mach 1.3. Simultaneously, 6 BGM-109E Tomahawk land attack missiles left the vertical launch cells of the Gettysburg and the Nitsa, their flight paths already programmed with GPS coordinates accurate to within 3 meters. 3 targeted the coastal battery launch complexes. 3 targeted the fire control radar installations that had provided targeting data for the attack. The AGM-88E AARGM is the current production variant of the anti-radiation missile family and represents a specific engineering solution to a specific tactical problem. Iranian radar operators have learned to shut down their systems when American aircraft appear in their threat receivers, denying the missile its homing signal. The AARGM addresses this by combining passive radiation homing with an active millimeter wave radar seeker and GPS inertial navigation. When a radar shuts down, the AARGM doesn't lose its target. It knows where the radar was, it continues to that location using inertial guidance, and in the terminal phase, its own millimeter wave radar activates to acquire whatever physical structure remains at those coordinates. A radar that turns off is no longer generating a homing signal. It is still a building at a known location. The Iranian fire control radar operators ran their shutdown procedures when the Super Hornets appeared on their threat warning systems. Standard doctrine, sound tactical thinking that had worked against earlier generations of anti-radiation missiles. It didn't work at 0531. The AARGM reached the primary fire control site 8 seconds after the radar went dark. The terminal millimeter wave seeker acquired the antenna array structure. The 146-pound warhead detonated inside the equipment bay. The radar van and its backup generator erupted in secondary explosions that the Truman's targeting systems observed in infrared from 90 miles away. The second fire control installation lasted 11 additional seconds before the second AARGM resolved the same problem in the same way. The Iranian crews had evacuated both facilities before impact, standard practice when missile launches have been detected and retaliation is assessed as imminent. The buildings were destroyed. The casualties were minimal. The equipment, which had taken years and significant foreign technical assistance to integrate and calibrate, was gone. The Tomahawks arrived 8 minutes after the aircraft strikes, 6 missiles at 550 miles per hour, flying terrain following routes at 100 feet altitude, guided by GPS and digital scene matching that compares terrain features against stored maps to maintain accuracy through any jamming environment Iran could generate. The 3 missiles targeting the launch complexes found the battery positions empty. The vehicles had dispersed after firing, standard Iranian doctrine. The revetments, the command bunkers, the reload infrastructure, the power supply systems, the communications equipment, none of it had legs. The Tomahawk's 1,000-pound warheads converted the fixed infrastructure into the kind of cratered rubble that requires months and tens of millions of dollars to rebuild, regardless of whether the mobile launchers escaped. The 3 missiles targeting the backup radar installations produced results identical to the AARGM strikes. Precise impacts, complete destruction of the technical infrastructure, evacuated personnel. All 4 Super Hornets recovered to the Truman by 0548. 0 aircraft damage, 0 pilot injuries, ordnance expended as planned. The cost accounting creates the kind of ratio that tells the strategic story more efficiently than editorial commentary could. Iran expended 8 Noor missiles at approximately $900,000, estimated production cost each, $7.2 million. The missiles accomplished nothing measurable. They revealed the precise locations of 8 coastal battery positions, confirmed the emission profiles and operating frequencies of the associated fire control radars, demonstrated the specific approach geometry Iranian doctrine uses for salvo attacks against carrier groups, and provided American electronic warfare analysts with 8 live seeker activation sequences to incorporate into future jamming algorithm updates. Iran also lost the fire control radar infrastructure at 2 installations, the physical battery structures at 3 launch sites, and the reloading and support equipment that sanctions will complicate reacquiring. Total infrastructure losses estimated between $35 and $45 million, much of it representing Russian and Chinese technical integration work that cannot be quickly replaced. The United States expended 12 SM-2 Block 3A missiles at $800,000 each, 6 Tomahawks at $1.87 million each, and 8 AARGM missiles at $870,000 each. Total munitions cost approximately $29.4 million. 0 aircraft lost, 0 ships damaged, 0 personnel casualties. The ratio by dollars runs roughly 1.5 to 1 in Iran's favor if you count only missile hardware. By operational effect, what each side retained and lost, it runs overwhelmingly in America's favor. Iran cannot restore the destroyed infrastructure quickly. The 8 Noor missiles cannot be unfired or their emission signatures recalled from American databases. The battery positions are known. The radar frequencies are cataloged. The attack doctrine has been observed under operational conditions and will inform American jamming and intercept planning for the next generation of systems. Russia's defense export clients watched with specific interest. The Chinese C-802 design family is the basis for not just the Iranian Noor, but for variants operated by a dozen navies across Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. The SM-2's intercept performance against a coordinated 8-missile salvo in sea skimming profile was the most operationally relevant live data point those navies had seen in years. 8 intercepts against 8 properly executed sea skimmers updated threat assessments in ways that classified briefings can describe, but live engagement data confirms. China's naval planning staff noted the AARGM performance against radar shutdown tactics. The PLA operates extensive networks of air defense radar systems whose operators are trained in the same shutdown procedures the Iranian crews used. The AARGMs demonstrated ability to continue prosecution after shutdown, updated the practical assessment in ways that matter to anyone designing radar-centric air defense architectures. Iranian state television broadcast that evening. Their Noor missiles had demonstrated Iran's ability to threaten American naval power in the Gulf. The footage showed the coastal battery crews and launch sequences and missile trails against the pre-dawn sky. What the footage didn't show was the SM-2 intercepts at 41, 38, and 36 nautical miles. It didn't show the AARGM hitting the fire control van 8 seconds after the radar went dark. It didn't show the Tomahawk craters where the launch infrastructure had been. The Truman's navigation log showed 0 heading deviations throughout. The carrier had maintained a straight transit line from the moment the first Nor left its rail to the moment the last Super Hornet touched down. 8 intercepts, 2 retaliatory strikes, 6 Tomahawks, 4 aircraft launched and recovered, all while holding course and speed without a single degree of deviation. Iran's Revolutionary Guard commanders designed the attack to demonstrate that American carriers face real risk in Persian Gulf waters, to show a domestic audience that Iran could reach out and threaten the most powerful navy in the world. What they demonstrated instead was a carrier strike group absorbing 8 simultaneously launched anti-ship missiles without altering course, and then systematically destroying the infrastructure that made the attack possible. Some operations generate the message their planners intended. This one generated a different message, written across 8 intercept debris fields and 3 infrastructure craters that appeared in commercial satellite imagery the following morning. The message read, "We saw the preparations 51 hours before launch. We had the response planned before your crews began loading missiles, and the carrier held course through all of it because nothing you fired came close enough to require a course change." The Gulf returned to its operational baseline. The Truman continued toward the Strait of Hormuz. Flight operations ran on schedule. Dinner was served at normal hours. Along the Iranian coastline, 8 battery positions that had been functional coastal defense infrastructure the previous morning were documented in post-strike imagery as smoldering rubble by the time the evening watch came on duty. They fired because they believed the attack would force a response that could be shaped into a political statement. The response they received eliminated the infrastructure that enabled the attack. The math was finished in the 51 hours between when American intelligence logged the missile loading activity and when the Gettysburg's Aegis system built the first intercept solution. The engagement itself was the confirmation of a result that had already been calculated. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of how modern naval missile defense actually works in a live engagement, share it and subscribe. The physics of these systems are worth understanding before someone else decides to test them.